The air in the Low Country don't just sit, it clings. It wraps itself round your throat like a damp velvet ribbon, smelling of pluff mud, salt rot, and the ghost breath of camellias. By December of 1886, Charleston was a lady trying to pin her fallen lace back together with rusted needles. But up the Ashley River at the Beaumont place, the air was thick with something else, something old, something root deep, something that tasted like copper on the back of the tongue. People whispered about the Beaumont women. They said they didn't just live on the land, they had a pact with it. They survived the war of northern aggression, not by hiding, but by standing still while the world dissolved around them. They invited the freemen, the merchants, the high-toned whites, and the Quakers alike, and the town came. They came because they were more scared of being left out of the Beaumont's protection than they were of the conjure women who offered it. Ava Moselle Beaumont moves through the parlor like a silk-screen dream, all darling and mercy me, but her eyes are always cutting upstairs, where the silence lives. Eleanor Beaumont hadn't breathed a word to a living soul since '67, the year the men in the white hoods came to burn the schoolhouse for the colored girls. She had stood on the porch back then, a shadow in a nightdress, and the fire just stopped. It didn't dare cross her line. But today, Christmas Day, the air is too still. Even the Spanish moss has stopped its weeping. Ava Moselle finds her mother on the second-floor veranda, staring at the Ashley. Down by the water sits the skeleton of the old schoolroom, its belfry leaning like a drunkard, the rusted bell choked with ivy. Eleanor's hand, gnawed like a tupelo root, reaches out. Her voice comes then, not a human sound, but a low vibration, the sound of a stone turning in a deep well. The river is restless, Ava. The great turtle is shifting his weight. It was the old talk, the Cherokee blood in their veins, usually kept behind a polite fan, spilled out in that whisper. In the old stories, the world is a great island floating on a sea, hanging by 4 cords from the sky vault. When the cords get frayed by the weight of too much blood and too much pride, the island heaves. "Come down, Mama," Ava Moselle says, her voice trembling. "The turkey's roasting, the brandy's poured." Downstairs, the big house is a cathedral of elegant tension. The dining table is a mile of damask and silver, heavy enough to anchor a ship. The smell of nutmeg and sweet potato pone fights with the scent of the cedar tree. Men with stiff collars talk about the cotton crop, their voices full of a security that only comes from owning things that can't talk back. Eleanor sits at the head of the table, her eyes milky and fixed. She doesn't eat, she listens. The first sign isn't a sound, it's a pulse. Thump, thump, thump. The brandy in the crystal glasses begins to dance, not a splash, but a series of perfect concentric rings, the Earth's own geometry. Then the freight train arrives. It isn't a shake, it's a roar that sounds like the end of time coming up from the mud. The smell of sulfur, the literal breath of the underworld, bursts through the floorboards, choking the scent of pine and peppermint. The 40-foot brick chimney, the spine of the house, begins to sway like a willow. Crack! Bricks start raining down the flue, exploding into the parlor like cannon fire, scattering red-hot coals across the Persian rugs. The guests, the sane ones, the ones who believed in banknotes and titles, they freeze. They become the statues they always pretended to be. But Eleanor is suddenly violently there. She stands, and her voice is a bugle call, sharp enough to cut the roar of the bucking floor. To the corner, the east corner, move, you fools, before the sky vault falls. She isn't a recluse anymore. She's the matriarch, the war woman. She directs them with the same steel she used against the Klan. As the house groans, tilting toward the river like a dying beast, the long, silent school bell begins to ring. Clang, clang. It isn't a human hand pulling the rope. It's the earth itself, shaking the iron tongue into a frantic carol. The dining table walks. It shudders across the room toward the windows, a poltergeist of privilege. The silver punch bowl topples, and the wine-red liquid spreads across the white linen, a deep, jagged stain that looks like a fresh wound. The candles on the cedar tree fall. The dry needles catch. In the corner of the bucking room, a pillar of fire rises, a burning bush in a house that is settling into the mud. They scramble. They flee the big house for the veranda, leaving the feast to the flames. Outside, the garden, the pride of the Beaumonts, is being ripped apart. Through the gray December light, sand boils erupt from the frost. Gray slime, the vomit of the deep earth, coats the festive wreaths. They huddle on the lawn, the highborn and the freemen, the Quakers and the conjurers alike, all of 'em shivering in the same cold. They watch the horizon, where Charleston is a jagged silhouette of orange and red. The city is burning. There is no turkey. There is no silver. Eleanor sits on a fallen log, her face soot-stained, but her eyes clearer than a mountain stream. They pass around cold biscuits, eating them like manna. The rusted bell in the ruined schoolhouse continues to toll, a slow rhythmic pulse that sounds like a heartbeat. The house still stands here, and y'all are safe, Eleanor says, her voice now a steady drawl, thick as molasses. The binding's held. The guests look at her, then at each other. They had spent decades shunning this house, fearing the roots and the whispers. But as the earth settled and the shadows of the burnt chapel stretched across the slime-covered grass, they realized they hadn't just accepted an invitation to a dinner. They had accepted an invitation to survive. And as the bells rang out over the ruined Low Country, for the first time in 20 years, the silence was truly gone.
Our dear delusional Mrs. Beaumont may have altered the flow of time for this story, but the great Charleston earthquake did occur. On the night of August 31st, 1886, at approximately 9:51 p.m., the ground beneath the Low Country ruptured with a magnitude estimated between 6.9 and 7.3, making it one of the most powerful seismic events in eastern U.S. history. Unlike the story's Christmas setting, the real disaster struck during a humid summer, sending shock waves felt as far away as Boston and Chicago. In Charleston, the destruction was apocalyptic. The city's iconic brick architecture crumbled into the streets, killing roughly 60 to 110 people and causing over $5 million in damage, nearly $170 million today. The sand boils and sulfurous smells mentioned in the narrative were terrifyingly real phenomena caused by soil liquefaction, where the vibration of the earth forced pressurized water and silt to erupt through the surface like miniature volcanoes. Because the crust in the eastern U.S. is older, colder, and more brittle than in the west, seismic waves travel much further and more efficiently. The city was plagued by aftershocks for years. In the first 30 years following the event, over 400 aftershocks were recorded. The fault responsible for the quake, now known as the Middleton Place Somerville seismic zone, is still active. Small tremors are still felt in the region today, reminding residents that the Low Country remains a seismically active zone.